Hey everybody, this is Doug Kinney from Relentless and Unstoppable. I know everyone in the world and in the martial arts world and the acting business are mourning the loss of our friend Richard Norton, as am I. This is the interview and the podcast I did with him that I shot the day before he passed away, a day and a half to be exact. May he rest in peace. The stuff on this podcast we aired and spoke about without knowing what was ahead, and God bless you, Richard. We tip our hat to you. Stay resilient, everyone, and we are going to miss Richard until the end of time. Quite amazing, man. I remember watching Terminator 2 and Terminator 1 for the first time just recently, and it was so stuntful that I was just wondering at one point, did they pay more for the stunts than they did for the actors? You just wonder as a movie buff, you know?
Well, yes, it's very expensive, but again, that's the whole idea of the movie. If you didn't have, it'd be like watching Mad Max and not having any car stunts because they're too expensive. Nobody's going to go and see it. That's the whole idea of the movie. It's a car chase movie. And Terminator and everything, of course, you got, by the way, Schwarzenegger would have been more expensive than the stunts, but that's another story. Maybe back then he wasn't. But the money's got to go into the selling point of the movie is the point. And people expect there's going to be incredible car chases, car crashes, and of course there's going to be physical fights. And you're right, stunts aren't cheap depending on what it is. If you have a fight, if I'm fighting, say you in a film and it's us in the middle of a floor, that's cheap because you just got to pay for me and you. There's nothing else to pay for. So that becomes quite cost effective. As soon as you bring, for instance, a motor vehicle into the fight or a truck or whatever, even if you don't have a stunt or roll it, there's so many safety factors have to go in. You got to have safety coordinators, you got to block off streets, you got to have stunt people. The vehicles have got to be specially adjusted and fitted for the stunt. The way, you're going to pull a handbrake on it, it will be different from a normal vehicle. On and on it goes. So it's a very expensive thing to do. And plus, if they're doing it correctly, like with Mad Max, they'll rehearse for months and months before that film is shot. Every stunt you see on camera, with Guy at the helm, is rehearsed multiple times because you don't want to be on set and have people with a cameraman around you, extras around you, other actors around, and have no idea of what could go wrong. So a good stunt, in essence, should be the safest thing you could ever do because the job of the coordinator and the safety coordinators is to try and predict everything that could go wrong with that stunt. Well, what if the steering failed? What if the brakes failed? What if you blew a tire? What would be the risk factors? And that's why there's a lot of expense goes in rehearsal to just allay those possibilities. And doesn't mean it won't go wrong. There are things that still on the day will go horribly wrong. And I would argue that's the reason stunt people get paid such big money is because if it goes wrong, it could be and possibly be catastrophic. There's been deaths on set through stunts going on, at the very least, broken bones and everything else. But again, that's the world of the stuntman. You take that job, you realize you're not there just to say a few lines and be all safe and cozy. Your job is to basically put your physicality on the line to make an amazing sort of action sequence. So again, all the vehicles like Mad Max, all those vehicles in Fury Road were basically built from scratch. It's not like they buy a car and they change a couple of things. They're built from scratch. That Giga Horse that I was in, that the Morton drives, the Morton with the gray hair and the big breathing apparatus. I mean, that had twin V8s in it. That thing was actually as it looked. That thing, you could put it on a racetrack and it's massive. And again, the amount of expense goes into that. Plus, they can't just have one. They've got to have doubles, sometimes three of different vehicles, because there's every possibility they film a ridiculous car roll, and they didn't get what they wanted. They need to do it again. So again, vehicle number two's got to come up, you know.
Yeah, for sure. I find it interesting that you mentioned about race cars and stunts. I recently learned that when they shot the movie Days of Thunder, you ever seen it?
Uh-huh.
When
Sure.
they shot the movie Days of Thunder, they used actual drivers that were racing in the NASCAR circuit for certain roles, and they picked drivers that looked like the characters, sort
Yeah,
of
of
being
course.
like the stuntmen, but just behind the car. And or behind the wheel, yeah. And Tom Cruise's stuntman was race driver Greg Sachs, who had won Daytona before in a research and development car upset. And what was interesting was in the race where Tom Cruise and Greg were filming, interestingly enough, Greg almost won the race. And so to this day, the NASCAR community's wondered what would have happened if Greg won that race? Because that would have affected the movie since, they weren't expecting him to win. You know what I mean?
Right, right.
So
Yeah,
that's what we talk about, which is not things don't always go according to plan. So if Greg won that race, it would have been a win, but also a lose, and vice versa. You know?
I mean, it's all these, so many of the stunties they use, especially for driving, are professional race car, whatever drivers, motorcyclists. I mean, again, getting back to Mad Max, you've got world-class people on those motorcycles for obvious reason. And yes, they will get characters look very, obviously they'll cast stunt people that could be a good double for whatever actor they're doubling. The good thing in a race car, of course, you got a helmet on, so that makes it a lot easier to get away with. But no, I've worked with some of the best in the world at what they do when it comes to racing vehicles, and again, why wouldn't you? You don't want to, that's not a hit and miss thing, especially if you got more than one car. And like I said, you're often got surrounded by so many other people. It's so choreographed. People don't understand, or if they thought about that, realize how, you see the car hurtling down the street and a couple of people will jump out of the way. I mean, that's rehearsed. I mean, for obvious reason, they've got to know which way they're going, which way the car's going. It's got to be like Dancing with the Stars, where everybody knows what the partner is going to do. And that includes physical fight scenes as well. It gets down to even throwing a punch. You can't just decide on a take that instead of punching me with the right hand, you're going to punch me with the left hand because I've, as an actor, would have learned that you're throwing a right punch, so I'm going to parry it or block it this way, and suddenly it comes out of left field. And I've seen that happen, by the way, with untrained actors. They get adrenalized, they're in the moment, they become the character, and they can become quite dangerous because, again, it's an art to learn how to do a choreographed fight scene and particularly to make it safe.